The biting chill of a New York winter seeped through the cracked window of Eli Palmer's tiny apartment, a space so small that it felt more like a storage closet than a home. The heater groaned in the corner, struggling to keep up with the freezing air that crept in through every gap. A tattered blanket hung over the lone chair, and the walls were decorated not with art, but with peeling paint and water stains that resembled abstract shapes Eli might have once found inspiring. He sat hunched over a sketch pad, a stub of charcoal in his hand, his fingers numb from cold and exhaustion. His latest work, an intricate web of geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an energy all their own, stared back at him from the page. It was beautiful, he knew that. But beauty didn't pay the bills. Neither did avant-garde art, as Eli had discovered the hard way. The bills on the counter mocked him, a stack of overdue notices that seemed to grow taller by the day. His landlord had left another warning on his door this morning, scrawled in angry red ink. Final notice: eviction pending. The refrigerator hummed faintly in the corner, empty except for a half-eaten loaf of bread and a jar of mustard. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but Eli ignored it, pouring the last of his energy into the one thing he couldn't give up: his art. Still, doubt loomed heavy in his mind. How long could he keep going? Every rejection, every failed gallery pitch felt like a nail in the coffin of his dreams. Maybe it was time to pack it in, to trade his pencils and brushes for a 9-to-5 job that might let him scrape by without the constant weight of uncertainty. But then he remembered the flyer he had seen at the community center last week: Christmas Eve Art Market. Sell your work to holiday shoppers. It was a small glimmer of hope in the sea of despair. Eli had spent the last few nights finishing pieces for the event, his sketch pad filling with bold experiments and desperate attempts to capture the spark that once set him apart. He glanced at the clock. The market would begin in a few hours, and he had just enough time to pack up his work and head out. With trembling hands, he gathered his sketches and paintings, tucking them into a weathered portfolio. This was it. One last chance to sell something, anything, before the walls closed in completely. As he stepped out into the frigid December air, the weight of his circumstances pressed down on him, but so did the faintest glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the day that everything changed. The Christmas market on 14th Street was a swirl of sights, sounds, and smells, alive with the energy of the season. Strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow on the rows of booths decorated with tinsel and garlands. Vendors called out to passers-by, their tables piled high with handmade ornaments, scarves, and trinkets that glittered in the golden light. The scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon wafted through the air, mingling with the distant hum of carolers singing a festive tune. Eli Palmer stood at his modest booth near the edge of the market, dwarfed by the more polished setups around him. His table was covered with a frayed black cloth, on top of which he had arranged his art, a collection of strikingly intricate designs that seemed to vibrate with hidden meaning. Few people paused to look. Most were drawn to the brighter, flashier displays nearby. He tugged his coat tighter around himself, his breath fogging in the air as he watched the crowd pass him by. Each minute felt heavier than the last, his hopes dimming with every uninterested glance. He tried to smile at a young couple who wandered close, but they barely spared his work a second look before moving on to the next stall. Just as Eli was about to resign himself to another fruitless night, a figure stopped at his booth. The man was unassuming, wearing a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that seemed too plain for the glitzy crowd. A baseball cap cast a shadow over his face, making it hard to read his expression. "What's this?" the man asked, his voice quiet but curious, as he pointed to a framed piece on the corner of the table. It was one of Eli's favorites, a design of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to twist and turn in impossible ways. "It's, an exploration of balance and chaos," Eli replied, unsure of how much detail the man wanted. He rarely got this far with potential buyers. The man nodded, tilting his head as he studied the piece. Interesting. It reminds me of something functional. Eli blinked, unsure of how to respond. I hadn't thought of it that way. It's more conceptual. The man smiled faintly and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. I'll take it. $1. Eli froze, the words catching him off guard. $1? That piece took me weeks to create. It's nice, the man said with a shrug, but it's not exactly commercial. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Better than nothing, right? Desperation clawed at Eli's pride. $1 felt like an insult, but the idea of going home empty-handed was worse. With a sigh, he nodded. Fine. The man handed him the bill, tucked the artwork under his arm, and disappeared into the crowd without another word. Eli watched him go, a hollow feeling settling in his chest. Little did he know, that dollar would soon cost him far more than he could ever imagine. Elon Musk set the artwork down on the long steel counter of his private lab, a sleek and minimalist space tucked away from prying eyes. The room was filled with prototypes and half-finished experiments, tools of innovation that had yet to see the light of day. He stared at the framed piece, its interlocking geometric shapes both mesmerizing and unnervingly precise. There was something about the design that spoke to him. It wasn't just art. It was a blueprint, or at least it could be. The pattern seemed to suggest a logic, a flow of energy that mirrored the way electrons danced through circuits or particles interacted in quantum fields. Elon tilted his head, the faintest of smirks tugging at the corner of his mouth. Interesting, he murmured to himself. He grabbed a tablet and began sketching over a digital version of the design, overlaying it with formulas and equations. The shapes fit into his calculations in ways he hadn't anticipated, offering solutions to problems he'd been wrestling with for months. He pulled up files on experimental energy storage systems, comparing the artwork's layout to existing technologies. Slowly, an idea began to take shape. Hours passed as Elon worked in silence, his focus unbroken. By the time he stepped back from the counter, the design had evolved into something entirely new. A revolutionary configuration for a battery capable of storing energy at unprecedented efficiency. His mind raced with possibilities, the impact on Tesla's electric vehicles, the potential applications in SpaceX's next generation of spacecraft, even the broader implications for global energy grids. The realization struck like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just art, it was a key to unlocking technologies that could change the world. Functional, he muttered, echoing the thought he'd had at the market. But it wasn't just functional. It was a goldmine. He tapped a few commands on his tablet, sending the modified designs to his legal team. File patents immediately, he wrote in the accompanying note. There was no mention of Eli Palmer. To Elon, this wasn't theft, it was discovery. The design had been his to take the moment he bought it, and now it would serve a greater purpose. As the lab lights hummed softly, Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind already leaping ahead to the headlines this breakthrough would create. He had taken a $1 investment and turned it into the foundation of a billion-dollar revolution. The news broke 2 months later, sending shockwaves through the tech world. Tesla unveils groundbreaking battery technology, the headlines read, accompanied by sleek promotional videos showing futuristic vehicles powered by the new design. Reporters hailed it as a leap forward in energy storage, one that could make renewable energy more practical and accessible on a global scale. Elon Musk stood on stage at the product's unveiling, wearing his signature confidence like a tailored suit. This isn't just about Tesla, he told the cheering audience. This technology will reshape how we think about energy, on Earth and beyond. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. Analysts predicted that the new battery would position Tesla years ahead of its competitors, opening doors to untapped markets and ensuring the company's dominance for decades. Investors flooded in, driving Tesla's stock to record highs. Behind the scenes, SpaceX engineers worked to adapt the technology for spacecraft, touting its potential to store solar energy more efficiently during long missions. "We're closer to Mars than ever before," one executive told reporters, his enthusiasm palpable. Elon basked in the accolades, becoming the face of innovation yet again. But as the world celebrated, Eli Palmer remained in the shadows, oblivious to the role he had unwittingly played. He spent his days at home, struggling to sell his remaining artwork to pay for groceries. The eviction notice loomed larger than ever, a constant reminder of his dwindling options. One evening, Eli sat in his dimly lit apartment, a cold cup of instant coffee beside him as he flipped through a tech magazine borrowed from the library. His eye caught a headline about Tesla's breakthrough. Intrigued, he skimmed the article, pausing when the accompanying image of the new battery flashed on the page. The geometric patterns etched onto the battery's casing were unmistakable. They were his. Eli froze, his mind racing. It had to be a coincidence. But as he read on, the descriptions of the technology structure sounded disturbingly familiar. He dropped the magazine onto the table, staring at it as a sinking feeling settled in his chest. Could it be? The thought gnawed at him. The piece he'd sold for $1. It couldn't possibly have led to this. Could it? Eli shook his head, trying to dismiss the idea, but doubt had already taken root. The world around him celebrated a genius, while Eli, the true spark behind the innovation, remained unnoticed, his life hanging by a thread. And yet, a part of him whispered that this was only the beginning. The faint buzz of the fluorescent bulb overhead filled the silence of Eli Palmer's apartment. He sat at his rickety table, flipping through the latest issue of Tech Tomorrow, a magazine he'd borrowed from the library, to distract himself from the gnawing hunger and the pile of unpaid bills. Most of the content didn't interest him: drones, cryptocurrency, AI. But a headline stopped him cold: Tesla's quantum battery, a leap toward unlimited energy. His breath caught as his eyes landed on the image accompanying the article. The battery, sleek and cylindrical, bore a design etched into its casing. It was subtle, almost decorative, but Eli would recognize those shapes anywhere. They were his, the intricate geometric patterns he had painstakingly drawn late one night, the very piece he'd sold for $1 to a stranger in a hoodie. "No," he whispered, shaking his head as if to dispel the thought. It had to be a coincidence. Geometric art wasn't unique to him after all. But the deeper he read, the more uneasy he felt. The article described how the patterns weren't just aesthetic. They were integral to the battery's revolutionary structure, providing a blueprint for energy flow optimization. Eli pushed the magazine away, his heart pounding. This couldn't be real. But the evidence stared back at him, unyielding. Doubt warred with a growing sense of dread. What were the odds? Could the man who bought his art really have transformed it into a billion-dollar breakthrough? He pulled out his portfolio, thumbing through sketches and drafts until he found the original. Placing it beside the magazine, he compared them closely. The similarities were undeniable. Every line, every curve. It was his work, reimagined and repurposed. Questions flooded his mind. How could this happen? Was it even legal? Did he have any rights to what had clearly been taken from him? Anger simmered beneath his disbelief, fueled by the memory of the stranger's smug offer of $1. He felt like a fool. But more than that, he felt betrayed. Eli spent the rest of the night researching. He scoured patent filings, news articles, and interviews, piecing together a trail that led directly to Tesla and Elon Musk. Each discovery tightened the knot in his stomach. His art, his creation, had become the foundation of a world-changing innovation, and he'd been erased from the story. The sleek glass doors of Tesla's corporate headquarters reflected Eli's tense expression as he stood outside, clutching a folder of evidence. He had spent days drafting emails and making calls, each attempt met with polite indifference or outright dismissal. "We'll forward your concerns to the appropriate department," they'd said, though he doubted anyone had even read his messages. This was his last resort, showing up in person. His nerves buzzed as he stepped inside, walking up to the receptionist. "I need to speak with someone about the quantum battery project," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked, barely glancing up. "No, but this is urgent. It's about intellectual property, my intellectual property." The receptionist offered a tight smile. "I'm sorry, but without an appointment, there's nothing I can do." Eli's frustration boiled over. "Do you understand what I'm saying? That battery, your billion-dollar breakthrough, it's based on my work." Her expression didn't waver. "I suggest you contact legal. Have a nice day." Eli walked out, seething. He'd hit yet another wall, but he wasn't done. Through relentless searching, he found that Elon Musk would be speaking at an upcoming public event. It was his chance, maybe his only chance, to confront the man directly. The auditorium buzzed with energy as Elon Musk took the stage, delivering a keynote on the future of energy. The audience hung on his every word, their admiration palpable. Eli, sitting near the back, clenched the folder in his lap. He waited, heart pounding, until the Q&A session began. When the microphone reached him, he stood. "Mr. Musk, I have a question," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "What role did the artwork you purchased play in the development of your quantum battery?" The room fell silent. Elon squinted toward the source of the voice, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said after a pause. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." Eli stepped closer to the stage. "You bought a piece of my art, a geometric design, at a Christmas market. That design is on your battery. It's integral to how it functions. Are you denying it?" Murmurs rippled through the audience. Elon's face remained calm, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. "Ah, yes," he said with a faint smile. "I remember the piece. Nice work, but it was just $1's worth of art, not exactly a blueprint." Eli's voice rose, fueled by indignation. "It wasn't just art, and you know it. You used my design, my creation, and turned it into this technology. Don't I deserve credit?" Elon's smile tightened. "Look, I admire your passion, but you sold the piece. It became mine to use as I saw fit. If anything, you should be proud that your work contributed to something so important." The words hit Eli like a slap. Proud? Proud to be exploited and forgotten? The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of sympathy and skepticism. Elon turned back to the audience, effectively ending the exchange. "Let's move on to the next question," he said, brushing Eli aside like a minor inconvenience. Eli stood frozen, the weight of dismissal pressing down on him. As security escorted him out, the realization sunk in. He was up against a giant, one who saw his contribution as little more than a stepping stone. But Eli wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Eli sat slumped at his desk, the dim glow of his laptop the only light in his apartment. Days had passed since his public confrontation with Elon Musk, and he felt no closer to justice. His inbox was filled with dismissive replies from lawyers and media outlets, their polite words boiling down to the same message. There's no story here. The exhaustion weighed heavy, but just as he was about to shut his laptop, a new email appeared in his inbox. The subject line read, "You're not alone." Eli frowned, clicking it open. The message was brief. "I worked on the quantum battery project at Tesla. Your design was the foundation. I have proof. Contact me through this encrypted platform. Trust no one." Attached was a link to a secure messaging app. Eli's pulse quickened as he followed the instructions, setting up an account and sending a cautious reply. "Who are you, and what proof do you have?" Minutes later, a response came through. The sender identified themselves only as Alex, claiming to be a former Tesla engineer who had left the company 6 months ago. Alex explained that they had worked closely on the quantum battery's development and had been troubled by the ethical lapses they witnessed, particularly regarding the origins of the design. "I couldn't say anything then," Alex wrote, "but seeing what they've done to you, I can't stay silent anymore." Soon after, a series of files began to arrive: blueprints, meeting notes, and internal emails. Eli opened the first document, his heart pounding. The sketches mirrored his artwork almost exactly, overlaid with technical annotations that mapped out the battery's functionality. Other documents included email chains where executives discussed how the design's origin was irrelevant and ensured it was patented under Tesla's name. Eli's breath caught in his throat. It was undeniable. His work had been taken, stripped of his name, and turned into a cornerstone of one of Tesla's most profitable ventures. But as the realization sank in, so did the fear. He stared at the files, knowing what revealing them would mean. Elon Musk's legal team would crush him if he went public. The man who casually dismissed his claims on stage would not hesitate to make an example of him, yet the alternative, remaining silent, felt like an even greater betrayal of himself and the truth. Eli spent the night wrestling with the decision. By morning, he knew he couldn't back down. He typed a reply to Alex: "I'm in. Let's do this." The expose hit the internet like a thunderclap. Titled "The Billion-Dollar Blueprint: How Tesla Took One Artist's Vision Without Credit," the article was published on a high-profile investigative journalism site, complete with the leaked documents from Alex. The story detailed how Elon Musk's company had repurposed Eli's geometric designs, tracing the direct line from a $1 Christmas market purchase to a multi-billion-dollar breakthrough. Within hours, social media erupted. Hashtags like "Justice for Eli" and "Tesla Exposed" began trending. Public opinion split like a crack in the earth. On one side were Elon's staunch defenders, dismissing Eli's claims as opportunistic or irrelevant. "Tesla took an idea and made it real," one tweet read. "That's innovation, not theft." On the other side were those demanding accountability. "Art is intellectual property too," another user argued. "Pay the man what he's owed." The media frenzy intensified as talk shows, podcasts, and online commentators dissected the story. Eli watched from his tiny apartment, his phone buzzing with notifications as his name became a lightning rod for debate. He hadn't sought fame, but now his face was plastered across headlines, juxtaposed with Elon's. It wasn't long before Tesla struck back. A sternly worded cease and desist letter arrived, accusing Eli of defamation and threatening to bankrupt him with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit if he didn't retract his claims. The letter was cold and calculated, designed to intimidate. Eli sat at his desk, the letter trembling in his hands. He knew this was a tactic to silence him, but the stakes were staggering. If he lost, he'd not only lose his art but also his future. The weight of the decision bore down on him like a boulder. Support poured in from unexpected places. Independent artists rallied to his cause, sharing their own stories of exploitation. Journalists defended the validity of the evidence. Even some former Tesla employees anonymously backed Eli's claims, calling out the company's ruthless tactics. Still, the legal battle loomed. Eli faced a choice: back down and protect what little he had left, or push forward and risk everything to demand justice. With the world watching, he knew there was no turning back. Eli took a deep breath and resolved to fight, no matter the cost. The envelope sat on Eli's table, stark and menacing, as if daring him to open it. Tesla's legal team had sent it by courier, a settlement offer to bring the public battle to a swift and quiet end. Eli stared at it, his heart pounding, knowing the document inside carried the weight of his future. When he finally unfolded the crisp pages, the terms were clear. Tesla would pay him $250,000, an amount that could clear his debts and sustain him for years. In exchange, he would sign a non-disclosure agreement, relinquish all claims to the quantum battery's design, and agree never to publicly discuss the matter again. It was both a lifeline and a betrayal. The sum seemed generous at first glance, But Eli knew it was a fraction of what the technology was worth. Tesla had already made billions, and this offer was a calculated move to erase his story while barely denting their bottom line. Eli slumped in his chair, the paper trembling in his hands. The temptation was undeniable. With this money, he could rebuild his life, pay off his landlord, and finally escape the constant anxiety of poverty. Yet the thought of signing away his truth gnawed at him. His work, the creation that had come from his heart and mind, would be forever disconnected from his name. Was survival worth that price? He spent sleepless nights weighing his options. Friends urged him to take the settlement, calling it a pragmatic choice. Even Alex, the whistleblower, suggested he consider it. "They'll keep coming after you," Alex warned. "This could end it." But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that accepting the offer would mean losing something far more valuable than money: his integrity. His fight wasn't just for himself, it was for every artist and creator who had ever been dismissed, exploited, or silenced. In the end, the decision crystallized one quiet morning as Eli looked at the sketches scattered across his desk. They weren't just designs, they were pieces of himself. With a steady hand, he penned a response to Tesla's legal team. "I decline your offer. I won't be silenced." It was a victory, but a costly one. Eli knew he had rejected financial security, trading it for a fight that could leave him with nothing. Still, as he mailed the letter, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had chosen to stand for what he believed in, no matter the cost. The rejection of Tesla's settlement offer sent shockwaves through the media. Eli Palmer had become an unlikely hero, a David standing against the Goliath of corporate greed. His decision to fight resonated with creators, innovators, and everyday people who saw in him a reflection of their own struggles for recognition and fairness. Artists from around the world began sharing their stories under the hashtag #ArtistPower. Painters, musicians, writers, and engineers recounted times they had been exploited or dismissed, creating a groundswell of support for Eli's cause. Grassroots organizations sprang up, rallying behind him and pushing for systemic change. Protests outside Tesla's headquarters grew louder, demanding accountability and transparency. Petitions circulated, calling for reforms to protect intellectual property rights for artists and small creators. Eli found himself at the center of a movement he hadn't anticipated, but now felt deeply responsible for. Though he struggled to keep up with the whirlwind of attention, Eli made time to speak at rallies and in interviews. His message was simple, but powerful. Creativity is the foundation of progress, and it deserves respect. No idea, no work, should be stolen, no matter how small it seems. The pressure on Tesla mounted. Public sentiment began to shift, with even some of Elon Musk's staunchest supporters questioning the company's ethics. Journalists unearthed more stories of overlooked contributors in Tesla's history, further fueling the conversation about exploitation and innovation. Eli's fight also caught the attention of lawmakers. Politicians, spurred by the public outcry, proposed new legislation aimed at strengthening intellectual property protections and ensuring that creators received fair credit and compensation. It wasn't a quick process, but Eli's story became a rallying cry for reform. Despite the growing support, Eli's life remained modest. He still lived in his small apartment, and financial struggles lingered. But his work gained a new audience, with galleries and collectors seeking out his art, not for its monetary value, but for the story it represented. Years later, the world had changed in ways Eli could barely have imagined. The laws protecting creators bore his name, a testament to his courage. Artists and innovators alike cited his fight as a turning point, a moment when the value of creativity was finally recognized. Eli stood in his studio, surrounded by sketches and canvases. He hadn't won wealth, but he had won something far greater, a legacy of integrity, a voice that had sparked a movement, and the knowledge that his fight had made the world a little more just. For him, that was enough. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even crazier.